Tired of shoes that don't quite fit right? New Mexico Shoes has a solution. Introducing our custom insoles and arch supports made just for you and ready the same day right here in Albuquerque. Perfectly tailored to your feet, enjoy the comfort and support you need. And while you're here, explore a huge selection of top brands. From casual to athletic, we've got the perfect pair waiting for you. Visit NewMexicoShoes.com for hours and location details. All right, welcome back to another episode of Riders Block. I am your host, Journal staff writer Sean Reider. As always, we are back with another podcast to preview this week's game, and it is a big one for New Mexico. They'll be taking on their rival, New Mexico State, down in Las Cruces at 6 p.m. on Saturday. You can watch that game via ESPN Plus, which is a streaming service. I can't explain exactly how to get the streaming right now, but a big one. I mean, New Mexico is off to an 0-4 start after last week's 38-21 loss to Fresno State at home during homecoming. And New Mexico State is off to a 1-3 start after a 31-11 loss to Sam Houston State last Saturday as well. Big stakes as always, though, in terms of the rivalry, bragging rights. This is the first year for head coach Bronco Mendenhall, his first time back in the rivalry since the early 2000s, and as well for Tony Sanchez, too, the head coach at New Mexico State. His first year, he played at New Mexico State. He knows the rivalry well. Ton at stake. And we got Las Cruces Sun News beat writer, New Mexico State beat writer, Nick Coppola to hop on and join us for a great conversation today. Really love the work that Nick is doing down there right now. And I think you guys will enjoy the conversation that we had today. Before we get to that, as always, I do want to plug the live show that Jeff Grammer and I have been doing twice a week at this point. We do them we do them on Mondays after Bronco Mendenhall's weekly press conference. Usually about 2 p.m. And then on Saturdays after whatever game, wherever it is on the road, doesn't matter. Usually about 30 minutes, maybe 45 minutes after the game is concluded, and we've kind of done all of our media obligations and the like. We enjoy doing them. We really enjoy the participation we've gotten from them, especially in this kind of climate right now where conference realignment is moving super quickly. And things are changing day by day. They've been a great avenue for us to, field questions and break down some of the things that are going down on that front. So highly encourage you guys to, tune into those and participate. Send whatever questions you got, no matter what they are. But with that being said, we're going to have Nick Coppola on here in a second, and I hope you guys will enjoy. All right, I am very happy to be joined by Nick Coppola, New Mexico State Athletics beat writer for the Las Cruces Sun News. Nick just started on the beat for New Mexico State. Nick, thanks for coming on, man.
Of course, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no worries. We've talked a little bit off the air about this, but it is obviously that week. It's rivalry week. Emotions are all out of whack at this point and all that. I do want to ask you, as an outsider coming in, like me, and experiencing this rivalry for the first time, what has it been like so far, and what have you learned about it?
Yeah, I mean, I've learned it's intense. It's definitely a bit fiery and very, very passionate. It's no different than maybe other rivalries than maybe that include like flagship schools versus state schools. There's a lot of those. I'm sure you're familiar with that as well, with you coming from Michigan State. So I'm sure you're with things about that as well. But I think I've learned that this is, the game that gets circled on both teams' calendars coming into the season for any sports. And from what I've learned from New Mexico State fans, especially, is that the rivalry that they have with UTEP, it's kind of like a brother rivalry. Like they got a little bit of love for UTEP, but it's still kind of a rivalry. But they don't, I guess, hate UTEP as much as they hate New Mexico. Like all the disdain, all of the resentment fully resides with the people at Albuquerque and the Lobos and things like that. It's a get down and dirty, screw you type of rivalry. It's very intense. I've definitely learned that from my short time here.
Yeah, I knew it was an intense rivalry coming in, but the intensity kind of shocked me when I first came in as well. This will be the first rivalry game for Bronco Mendenhall as a head coach in New Mexico. He's coached it before as a defensive coordinator at New Mexico, but also a new coach in Las Cruces after Jerry Kill resigned last December, and it's Tony Sanchez, who is not unfamiliar with this New Mexico State rivalry either. That's a name that should be familiar to UNM fans after he spent, I believe, 4 seasons as the head coach at UNLV. really successful at Bishop Gorman High School in Las Vegas before that, and he is a New Mexico State alum, played wide receiver for the Aggies in the 1990s. Just general, I mean, in your time covering him, what have you learned about Tony and how he kind of runs things?
Yeah, my first big enterprise story when I was while here at the Sun News was on Tony Sanchez. Just for people to be introduced to him, especially for New Mexico State fans. And the thing that I learned most about him, and the thing that everybody told me about him, was that he's very, very intense in the way that he coaches and the way that he goes about things. And he carries kind of a chip on his shoulder, wherever he went. And I asked him about it, and he didn't deny that either. And so, I kind of built my story around that. And he doesn't really know where it comes from, but it's been with him, throughout. It took him a while to land, a big, head coaching job in college. He had to spend a little bit of time in high school ranks or in assistant ranks and things like that. He had to go JUCO out of high school. He didn't get to play Division I right away with New Mexico State. So maybe that's where it stems from originally. But yeah, he's very intense. He runs things like a meritocracy. He's a little bit old school. He's all about serving their teammates. Kind of like an old school kind of mentality within, but not like too old school in the way that he runs things schematically and systematically, but just in the way that he wants the culture to be built. He's big on, like I said, serving your teammates, being gritty, being tough, kind of also carrying, a bit of a chip on your shoulder going into the game, which kind of, maybe the mentality of New Mexico State's athletics as a whole. And so, that's definitely the kind of culture he's trying to instill.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting contrast. I don't think Bronco is outwardly intense. I think he can be intense for sure. But it's not something he often shows in the sidelines and, in press conferences and all that. And in terms of talking about the rivalry this week, I mean, he made a point to say that, it means a ton to the people in the state. It's obviously meaningful to our program, but it's not quite, I don't mean to say it's like he's truly downplaying the game, but he's like, it doesn't almost take more meaning over what we're trying to get done as a program overall and the process we're trying to instill here at this point. How is Tony Sanchez treating this rivalry game at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they're denying that the fact that it is, the game, for New Mexico State, and that's the game that you want to win. If you go 1-11, this is the one win that you would like to have. And yeah, with it maybe comes from him, being an alumnus. Of course, maybe Bronco Mendenhall maybe isn't that for New Mexico, and Tony Sanchez maybe feels a little bit more because he got to play in it. He's followed New Mexico State throughout. So maybe he's just maybe a little more involved in it. But I don't think he or any of the players that we've talked to this week are really shying away from that. Especially the veterans on this team. We only got to talk to a couple young guys and some transfer players this week and on Monday, but they told us how much of the veterans are telling them like Cannon Yarrow, like Cordell David, like other guys on the team, how much this game means to them and how much they really do want to win this game. So, no one from New Mexico State is really downplaying that, this is the one game that we want to win every single year.
And then season so far, New Mexico State is 1-3, opened with a kind of nip and tuck 23-16 win at home over FCS Southeast Missouri State. Turned in an uneven, but in my opinion, a pretty strong performance, and a 30-24 loss to Liberty after that. And then a 48-0 loss to Fresno State. And then last Saturday's 31-11 loss to Sam Houston State. The offense has obviously struggled. I think they're right around 211 yards total offense per game, which is the lowest mark in FBS at this point. But I've seen nice stuff out of this defense at this point. What are you kind of making of this start for NMSU, man?
Yeah, I mean, the offense is definitely their biggest struggle, like you said, one of the worst offenses in FBS so far. They really struggled to find a quarterback. They went with Parker Watt to start. He hasn't really played that well. Deuce Hogan got the majority of the snaps against Fresno State. He didn't really play that well either, and then he broke his collarbone, so he's not going to be an option going forward. They went with Santino Mariucci, who was a Wake Forest transfer, and the third-string quarterback coming into the season. He went the distance against Sam Houston, and he looked better than Deuce Hogan and Parker Watt, but there was still a lot of room for improvement, a lot of room to grow from him. They definitely seem to trust him more because they threw 29 passes against Sam Houston, which was by far the most passes that they've thrown or any quarterback has thrown all season. And so yeah, they're hopeful that with him getting more reps with the starters, which he really hasn't had up until this point, that he'll improve based off that. They've also had some offensive line issues. Shias Pete, who's their all-conference tackle, hasn't played so far this season. He's missed every game so far with an ankle injury. He'll miss one more, so he'll miss Saturday's game against New Mexico. So he won't be there. It'll be their backup, Shamar Jackson. They were also out with Canyon Yarrow, their main center, another all-conference player. He missed the last game against Sam Houston with an injury, and so they had to kind of do some shuffling on the offensive line. Like you said, the defense has been good. It's definitely been the strong point. They have not been put in the best situations by the offense. So that's not really ideal for them. And I feel like it's been very, very contrasting. From their first two games and then their last two games. Of course they weren't great against Southeast Missouri, but they did enough to get the win. Of course, they played very well against Liberty until the last 5 minutes or so. And then, just two very bad losses, when you get the doors blown off you by Fresno State, and then you only cross the midfield twice on Sam Houston in that game. You lose by 20 in a game where, you started off fine, but then, in the second half, you never really had much of a chance, So I think there's a decent team in there, a team that can win 6 games. They started 2-3 last year, and then they went to the Conference USA title game. So maybe the same can happen again. But these last 2 games haven't exactly inspired confidence for the Aggies.
Yeah, I was down in Cruces for the Liberty game and covering that and all that, and I believe, they led it was until the final minute. Liberty retook the lead, for good, basically, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, they were up 24-15 with like 5 minutes left, and then they just collapsed and they lost 30-24.
Yeah, and it wasn't a great offensive night. There were chances for them to put them away in the third quarter there, but kind of almost did enough, and the defense was great that night. But in terms of kind of the the slow start and all that. I believe New Mexico State started 1-5 in 2022 as well. They went to a bowl game after that. Obviously 2-3, like you just mentioned. Went on to the conference championship game after that too. Our guys kind of treating this stretch ahead, and New Mexico in particular as kind of the point for them to really turn it around and make a run going forward.
Yeah, I think they're really viewing this game as kind of a way to spark their season and get themselves back on track. Tony Sanchez said it himself on his Monday presser. This is a chance for both teams to reignite, he said, their seasons. And so they're definitely viewing, of course, you want to gain bragging rights against your in-state rival, but they're also looking at it as a game as, hey, this is a chance for us to, get all of our hard work, get all the work that we've done to improve ourselves and have that all pay off as essentially, and a chance to solve some of the problems that they've been having. So, we'll see if they can against New Mexico, but they're definitely not downplaying the rivalry, and they're definitely not downplaying what this game can do for them in terms for turning around their season.
Mm-hmm. And then a little bit more on the offense. In terms of the run game, it's kind of keyed by Oklahoma transfer Seth McGowan, Buffalo transfer Mike Washington, and then returner Monte Watkins. McGowan's really physical. That's the one thing that stood out to me about watching him, on tape and on person. Watkins has always had that oh crap kind of speed when he can get on the edge and kind of, just pick a seam or a lane or whatever and go. In terms of the run game, though, I think you touched on a little bit with the offensive line too. What have been some of the struggles in terms of getting that going in the way that, I think that this offense, this staff in particular would like it to be?
Yeah, firstly, they haven't been at full strength on the offensive line for the entire season. Obviously, I just mentioned Shias Pete has missed the entire season so far. He'll likely make his season debut in the next game against Jacksonville State, but he will not play against New Mexico. And against Sam Houston, they had to do a lot of rotating because both Pete and Yarrow were out. So they moved one of their guards to center, and then they had to start one of their backups at guard. And so, you were basically starting 2 backups and the guy who was out of position against Sam Houston, which wasn't ideal. Part of the problem also comes with, some of the quarterbacks taking sacks. That was one of Parker Watt's biggest struggles, especially against Southeast Missouri. He was just, in the pocket for too long, and when he would scramble, he would run back towards the defensive lineman or run back in their vicinity and things like that. And, it was just him taking sacks. And so, I feel like, it's both of those problems in one. I don't think Mariucci has that same issue, and maybe he'll do a little bit better now that they should have Yarrow back for New Mexico, so they won't have to do all this shuffling on the offensive line. So yeah, I think that's where they're at with the offensive line, and of course I think things will hopefully improve, or they hope that things will improve for them once they get all 5 of their starters back for Jacksonville State after the New Mexico game.
And then in terms of receivers, T.J. Pride, P.J. Johnson III, Jordan Smith, and Cordell David, a relatively prominent returner there in that room too. What have you seen out of these receivers so far? I know it hasn't been the most explosive passing game to this point, so it's kind of tough to evaluate in some ways. But who are the guys that people should be looking out for on Saturday?
Yeah, you said it. I mean, it's been hard for all of them to get involved just because of the quarterback struggles that they've had. Parker Watt especially had trouble finding them and giving them the ball and getting them involved and things like that. Hogan kind of shared similar struggles. Mariucci was passing around a little bit more, so they were a little bit more involved. So, some of the issues lying on them. There have been a lot of drops this season, so that's on guys like them, but. Cordell David and P.J. Johnson have been the 2 main guys that have been targeted. I don't think many receivers have been targeted as much as those 2 guys have. Those have been the main 2 receivers for them. They got tight ends involved a lot in the last game. Hunter Talley also missed with an injury, so Jerry Lydiat stepped in there, and he caught a touchdown. Santino was looking his way a lot. And so if they don't get Hunter Talley back for the New Mexico game, I'd imagine Jerry gets a little bit more looks as well. So that's a guy to watch out for in Hunter's plays. And yeah, they're going to keep trying to get PJ. They're going to keep trying to get Cordell more involved. And maybe they hope that, this new quarterback and a second star kind of sparks them and gets them back on track. Cordell David he's their leading returning. He's their leader in receiving yards for returners last year, because of course a bunch of guys left, and he was their leader in receiving yards period in 2022. So he's got some potential. They like what they see in him, and so they definitely want to get that guy more involved.
Defensively, we've touched on it a little bit too. I mean, there's good pieces on this defense. I mean, defensive end Buda Paletti, linebacker Tyler Martinez, Oklahoma State transfer safety Nick Session. That's a guy I remember in the spring talking to Sanchez, and he said he really, really liked what he brought to the table, and I think he's been pretty good so far. In terms of, similar vein of questioning, I mean, what are the guys that people should be looking for on this defense come Saturday?
Yeah, the safeties have been probably the most impressive group as a whole on the team. They got a lot of talent there. You said with Nick Session, he's played a big role for the Aggies this season. Tatum Barnes is a returner. He's probably been their best safety this season. Josiah Cox got 2 interceptions against Sam Houston, which were their first takeaways since that Southeast Missouri game. And they've really struggled to get takeaways this season. So, Cox getting those 2 interceptions provides a spark for that, even though they threw the ball right back to him with 2 of their own interceptions after Cox's picks. DeMarcus Crosby is another guy that rotates in there and has played pretty decent in his snaps as well. So that safety group as a whole is pretty deep and very talented. Dylan Early is one of their veteran leaders in there as well. He'll get a majority of the snaps as well, just because they trust him a lot for being a redshirt senior and for being there for a while. Besides the safeties, DeCara Cobbs has easily been their top corner this season. He's another transfer for them, coming out of Sam Houston. And he's been graded as their highest corner. So, I expect him to be, for them to lean on them a lot, for them to lean on him a lot against New Mexico. Buda Paletti and Sony Alpio. I think I don't know.
It's tough. I feel like I've pronounced it like 4 different times in the time that I've seen him play.
Those kind of names are hard, but those 2 guys that have played a big role as well. Sony has, I think been their top linebacker this season. He plays all over the field. They trust him to do a whole lot. Martinez was another guy you mentioned. I think he had a solid outing against Sam Houston. They would like to get maybe Kel Edwards more involved. He hasn't made the impact one might have hoped out there at edge rusher. But they keep starting them, so I think they expect more out of him. And so maybe New Mexico is the spark for them, or for the Aggies. And so the secondary has probably been the most impressive group, safeties especially, and defensive line has been okay. Linebackers have been alright, but they definitely want to get a few more guys in there and have great ring.
And then in terms of just, I don't know how much New Mexico you've been able to watch this point, because we all know, I mean, like, Saturdays get busy, man, and it's tough to keep an eye on everything. But at the same time, I mean, like, when you look at this New Mexico State team and you look at this New Mexico team, there is kind of a contrast. New Mexico's offense has been, honestly, I mean, we heard throughout fall camp and we heard throughout the spring, guys saying this is going to be a good offense. And you're kind of thinking, well, we got to see it first. And it has been good. I mean, it's been pretty impressive in terms of scheme, in terms of production, and who they've produced against. On the other hand, New Mexico State, I think their defense has been pretty darn good, too. And then it's kind of a flip-flop as well. New Mexico State's offense hasn't been great, and New Mexico's defense has probably taken some steps forward for sure, and they're pretty banged up in the secondary as well. But to this point, it's not been super impressive either. Where are you seeing kind of the edges that New Mexico State might have over New Mexico?
Yeah, for New Mexico State, that's a good question. Like you said, I haven't seen much of New Mexico football recently. But I feel like that if they have an edge, it's definitely with their running backs. Every time they've had a big offensive play this season, they've leaned on their running backs, and Seth McGowan especially. He'll be one of the most talented players on the field for either team. This Saturday, he's a guy that once played at Oklahoma. He was a 4-star recruit that got recruited by all the big programs, Alabama, Michigan, Texas, you name it. He was recruited by them coming out of high school, and he did some things off the field that kind of got him dismissed from Oklahoma, and he had to bounce around some junior colleges, but now he's had a good season for New Mexico State. It's probably been their most impressive offensive player so far this season, easily. So he's going to play a big role for them. I imagine, their safety group is especially, like I mentioned, I feel like that provides an edge for New Mexico State team, because it's probably the most impressive part of their defense so far, and things like that. Tony Sanchez talked a lot about New Mexico's quarterback, and that he likes him and the way he's played this season. So he's definitely been impressed with their offense and things like that. And for me, I mean, New Mexico's 0-4, but most of their season, I feel like, has been a very bad draw. I mean, they had to play Montana State, which is an FCS team, but they're one of the best FCS teams. I think when I last checked, they're ranked number 3 in FCS. So that's a pretty tough draw for them. Then they had to play 2 power teams. They had to go on the road to play Arizona and Auburn. Arizona's got one of the best quarterback and receiver duos in the Big 12, if not the entire country. So that's a pretty tough draw as well. I mean, and Fresno State looks pretty good as well. I mean, I thought they looked a little bit better against Fresno State. But again, it's just been tough to evaluate them just because of most of their games and who they played. But Tony Sanchez thinks they're getting better every week. Despite their 0-4 record, he definitely thinks they're going to come out and play with a bit of fire, a bit of intensity, especially since they're still looking for their first win. And so I think those are the advantages that maybe both those teams might have.
Yeah, can confirm from seeing it in person, Noah Fafita and Tetairoa McMillan. Yes, very much one of the best quarterback wide receiver duos in the nation. I don't know if I'll ever see a wide receiver performance like that in person. That was absolutely insane. And I don't care if a good deal of it was on New Mexico. It was nuts. But before we kind of get into the prediction and thinking about what could happen this Saturday and all that, I think you did just touch on a good deal of this too in terms of talking about where there might be edges. I mean, what needs to go right for New Mexico State to kind of beat New Mexico and keep the winning streak and the rivalry going?
They got to get into the red zone. I mean, New Mexico State has scored on every red zone trip that they've had this season. They are 100%. They are perfect in the red zone. The problem is that they struggle getting there. I think they only crossed midfield twice out of their 13 drives against Sam Houston.
Only twice, only twice.
Only twice. They crossed it on their first drive. They didn't cross it again until the fourth quarter. And but when they crossed it, they scored. But they couldn't get there. They couldn't get down the field, and so they've got to improve on the offense. Santino Mariucci has got to get into a rhythm. He's got to get those receivers involved. The offensive line has to do a better job of protecting him, which I think they will with getting Cannon Yarrow back. Those tackles. Especially Shamar Jackson in place for Shias Pete. They've got to be better, and they need to get their running backs more involved, because that's probably the most talented group on the offense. Seth McGowan needs to make a big play. that's probably going to be required if New Mexico State is going to win, because their defense is going to make some stops. I mean, they're going to have their fair share of stops, and they'll force New Mexico into some 3-and-outs. Their offense has to take advantage. They have to get going. They just have to play better. They cannot struggle like they have been. And maybe Santino plays better and gets those guys involved. But that spark just has to be there. And I mean, defensively, it's been impressive, but they got to get more takeaways. They've only had one through their first 3 games. They got 2 against Sam Houston, so maybe that'll spark them. But they got to get those takeaways more. They've really preached that in practice, or at least that's what they've been telling us. And when they get those takeaways, offense has got to take advantage of them. Like I said, when they got those 2 takeaways against Sam Houston, on both of those ensuing drives, they threw the ball right back to Sam Houston with 2 interceptions of their own. So, they have to get the offense going, defenses to get more takeaways. And, if they can score, they don't have to score every possession, but if they could just get the necessary points and take advantage of some of those defensive stops, I think they'll be in good shape.
Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting on paper, right? It's a game, it's a rivalry game for sure, but it's a rivalry game pitting an 0-4 team against a 1-3 team. And on paper, you might say the stakes aren't that high, but the stakes are relatively pretty high. I think, if New Mexico State wins this game, you're certainly going to have the fan base kind of back on your side. And for New Mexico, if you lose this game, you drop to 0-5, you're going to lose the chunk of the fan base more likely than not, which is interesting as well. How have you seen? I mean, we haven't talked to players yet over here in New Mexico, or in Albuquerque, I should say. But I mean, how have you seen guys maybe embrace? I don't know if the pressure is the right word, but kind of the that desire to come out and assert themselves and get on the right path.
Yeah, it's tough because most of New Mexico State's key players and starters are new. So this is the first time that they're going to be playing in this type of game, and this is the first time that they are going to be playing in a big crowd at AMS. They had a decent one against Liberty, but obviously the stand's probably going to be more full for this game. It's a 6 p.m. game, so it's not what so far at night, like it was against Southeast Missouri or Liberty when you had those 8 p.m. start times. So yeah, I mean, this is going to be the first taste of an atmosphere like this at New Mexico State. And, I think the question is, are they going to embrace that energy? Are they going to play with the necessary energy supposed to match, what the atmosphere is going to be? So I think that's the main question. They sounded confident that they would be able to, especially from things that Tony Sanchez has been telling them and veterans in the team have been telling them. But I don't think we might know that until we actually see them play. So that's a big question for them for sure. And I don't know that they didn't really say anything about pressure specifically, but they did mention like I said before, that this is the chance spark their season. You're 1-3. You haven't had one since week 1. And, not only could you get it against your biggest rival, but you get a chance to rebound and go 2-3 and, re-enter conference play back on winning terms. And so, yeah, I think they definitely know what's at stake in this game for sure.
And this is the product of the schedule that you kind of mentioned, Montana State, Arizona, Auburn, and all that, and then Fresno State. Games where UNM was not favored in. By this point in the week, Tuesday and all that, I feel like I have a pretty good idea of what's going to happen in terms of prediction. I have no clue at this point for New Mexico State in terms of, I've been watching both teams back and kind of trying to figure it out, and I'm just not sure. Do you have a prediction of any sort in terms of a score or just what you think might happen?
Oh, gosh. Yeah, I mean, it's tough because, New Mexico's 0-4 and, New Mexico State has been, the variance in their games have been very different. They got the win, but didn't look great against Southeast Missouri. Then they looked fantastic against Liberty and then lost it. And then they looked terrible against Fresno State and Sam Houston. I mean, they looked a little bit better against Sam Houston, but they still lost pretty decisively. And I mean, New Mexico's 0-4, but they've had a very tough schedule. So far, handed to them, especially with the opponents that they have played. So it's very tough to, I think, to evaluate just the Lobos so far, especially what they're going to bring. I think it's going to be close. I think this game is I don't think either team is going to blow up the other. I think it's going to come down to the wire. I don't know, man. It's tough. I feel like it could go either way. New Mexico's favored by 9 on the road last time I checked. I don't know, man. It's tough to make a prediction like this. I'm kind of leaning Aggies for this one, but I could also easily see New Mexico coming in there and winning by 10 or something like that. It's a very winnable game for the Lobos. That's where I'm at with that.
Yeah, I wasn't shocked that New Mexico would be favored. Jeff Grammer and I did a live show on Saturday night where he was insistent that New Mexico State would be favored, and I sternly disagreed with him. But the fact that they opened at 10, at least in some places, as a 10-point favorite, that did surprise me. And I mean, we're seeing it go down a little bit. I think yesterday I saw that it was around 8.5 in certain spots, and I wouldn't be shocked if it went down even more. But I think I'm banking on a close game, too. I don't have on paper, yes, I think there's more of a lean towards New Mexico, but I don't know, man. That's why you play the games, and we're going to figure it out. So
yeah, there you go. Yeah, games aren't played on paper. That's a good thing about football. And so, I do expect a good game. So this Saturday or something.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, I mean, I think it was like Lou Holtz who said, I mean, you never get the same team twice in a row. Although, I mean, sometimes you do, but most of you don't. So, all right. Well, that was Nick Coppola for the Las Cruces Sun News. You can find his work through the Las Cruces Sun News. If you like Division I athletics in the state of New Mexico, please support his work. He's doing a great job down there. I'm very happy we have a New Mexico State beat writer again. It's great to see. Nick, is there anything else you'd like to add, man?
Not really. No. I think it's pretty sad. I'm just I'm looking forward to seeing what happens, and I'm looking forward to watch these kind of rivalries. That's what makes college sports so special, especially with these flagship versus state school kind of rivalries. Those are always very interesting, and just looking forward to it. If it's a blowout, I'm gonna be very sad because these type of games deserve close games, big moments, and things like that. So I'm hoping that happens.
Yeah, from a work perspective, you don't always hate blowouts in terms of filing gamers on time and meeting deadline and all that. But definitely for a game like this, I mean, you want a competitive, hard-fought game. And if it goes down the last play, man, we'll deal with it on deadline. So, Nick, thank you again, man. I really appreciate your time today.
Of course, yeah. Thanks for having me on.
All right, thank you for watching that interview with Nick Coppola. Once again, I mean, I think I just plugged it at the end of the interview, but I mean, if you would like Division I athletics in the state, definitely support his coverage. He's doing a really good job down there with football, and I know he's going to do a great job with basketball as well. He also does does a good job with prep athletics coverage down there as well too. But that was another episode of Riders Block. If you have any questions related to New Mexico football, feel free to send them to srider@ABQ Journal. And once again, I encourage you guys to tune into the live shows that Jeff Graham and I have been doing. We might even have a special guest on Saturday night after the show, during the show, I should say. So, yeah, be sure to tune in. And thanks again for supporting the Journal and the product we're putting out here.
Thank you for joining us. You can find this episode and all our podcasts on the Albuquerque Journal website, abqjournal.com, as well as on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, and SoundCloud. If you enjoy our podcasts, please like and subscribe, and consider becoming a digital subscriber to the Albuquerque Journal to help us continue to bring you more content like this. See the show notes for a discount on a digital subscription. Thank you for supporting the Albuquerque Journal, New Mexico's leading local news source.